The last stay. I'll never stay in an Airbnb again. I've always loved traveling, and staying in quirky, cozy Airbnbs was part of the adventure. The personal touches, the unique locations, they all felt more authentic than a sterile hotel room. But after what happened in Cedar Grove, I've learned my lesson. It was last October when I decided to take a solo trip to clear my mind. Work had been overwhelming, and I needed to recharge. I found a charming little cottage on the outskirts of Cedar Grove, a sleepy town surrounded by dense woods. The listing was perfect: rustic retreat, peaceful, private, and surrounded by nature. The host, Lauren, had glowing reviews. Guests raved about her hospitality, the cleanliness of the cottage, and the serene setting. The price was suspiciously cheap, but I didn't question it. I booked 3 nights and packed my bags. When I arrived, the place looked just like the photos, almost too perfect. The cottage was a quaint little thing, with ivy crawling up its stone walls and a wraparound porch adorned with rocking chairs. It sat at the end of a long, gravel driveway, hidden from the main road by towering pine trees. Lauren wasn't there to greet me, but she left a note on the kitchen counter. "Welcome. Make yourself at home. Feel free to explore the woods, but avoid the old well past the clearing. It's not safe. Enjoy your stay." Lauren, that should have been my first red flag. Why mention the well at all if it wasn't important? But I brushed it off, unpacked, and spent the rest of the afternoon reading on the porch. The stillness was unnerving at first, but I eventually began to relax. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought I heard footsteps outside. Soft, deliberate, like someone pacing. I told myself it was probably a deer or some other wildlife, but I locked the doors and windows just in case. The next morning, I decided to explore the cottage. It was charming but old, with creaky floors and a faint smell of mildew. On a dusty shelf in the living room, I found a photo album. Curious, I flipped through it. The first few pages were harmless enough. Pictures of the cottage being built, smiling families posing in front of it. But as I turned the pages, the photos became unsettling. One showed a woman standing near the edge of the woods, her face obscured by shadow. Another captured what looked like a figure peering through the living room window. The last photo made my stomach drop. It was a close-up of someone lying in bed, taken from the ceiling. I slammed the album shut and shoved it back on the shelf, trying to convince myself it was just a prank. Maybe Lauren had a dark sense of humor, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, I woke up to the sound of something tapping on the bedroom window. My heart raced as I slowly turned my head. There was nothing there. But then I heard it again, tap, 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 this time from the living room. I stayed frozen in bed, clutching my phone. Should I call someone? The police? What would I even say? Gathering my courage, I crept out of bed and tiptoed to the living room. The tapping stopped as soon as I entered. My breath fogged in the cold air, and I realized the front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. I locked the door, grabbed a kitchen knife, and spent the rest of the night sitting in the corner of the bedroom, waiting for sunrise. By morning, I was done. I packed my bags, ready to leave, but as I loaded the car, something caught my eye. A faint trail led from the back of the cottage into the woods. Against my better judgment, I decided to follow it. The trail wound through the trees, eventually opening into a small clearing. In the center stood an old, crumbling well, just as Lauren's note had warned. Something compelled me to approach it. I peered over the edge, expecting to see darkness, but instead I saw photos. Hundreds of them, scattered on the stones at the bottom of the well. I couldn't make out the details, but I recognized the one on top immediately. It was the same photo of someone lying in bed from the album in the cottage. My stomach churned. As I stepped back, I felt the hairs on my neck rise. I wasn't alone. Turning around, I saw a man standing at the edge of the clearing. He was tall, with unkempt hair and a dirty flannel shirt. His eyes were wide and unfocused, and he held a Polaroid camera in his hands. "Lovely place, isn't it?" he said, his voice raspy and uneven. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. "I've been documenting the stays here," he continued, raising the camera. "You're going to make a beautiful addition." I bolted, running as fast as I could back to the cottage. Behind me, I heard the rapid click of the camera shutter and the man's footsteps crashing through the underbrush. I reached the car, fumbling with the keys as my hands shook. Just as I started the engine, the man burst out of the woods, camera in hand. He didn't chase me, though. He just stood there, snapping photos as I sped down the gravel driveway. I didn't stop driving until I reached a gas station miles away. I told the clerk what had happened, but he looked at me with pity and confusion. "Hawthorne Cottage? That place burned down years ago," he said. My blood ran cold. No, I stammered. I just stayed there. It's still standing. The host, Lauren. There's no Lauren, he interrupted. And that land's been abandoned for decades. No one goes there anymore. Not after what happened. I returned home, trying to put the experience behind me. But things weren't the same. I started noticing strange things in my apartment. Objects moving, cold spots, and the faint smell of smoke. One night, I found a Polaroid on my kitchen counter. It showed me asleep in my bed, taken from the ceiling. The next morning, I called the police, but they found no signs of forced entry. They told me to install a security system and try to relax. But the photos kept coming. The last one I received was different. It wasn't of me, it was of Lauren. Her face was pale, her eyes empty, and she stood in front of the well, holding a Polaroid camera. And on the back, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were 3 words. Welcome back soon. Room for 2. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked in. Traveling solo was my thing. I'd stayed in countless Airbnbs, some amazing, some forgettable, and a few downright weird. But this one, it was different. The listing was innocuous enough. Cozy apartment in historic district. The photos showed a quaint 1-bedroom unit with brick walls, a modern kitchen, and a great view of the city skyline. The host, Evan, had good reviews, and the price was perfect for a last-minute trip. I booked it on a whim, desperate for a weekend getaway. I arrived late in the evening. The apartment was in an old building tucked between 2 cafes, and the neighborhood had that charming vintage feel. I found the key under the mat, just as Evan had said, and let myself in. The place was exactly as advertised, clean, cozy, and tastefully decorated. A handwritten note on the kitchen counter welcomed me. Make yourself at home. I'm staying nearby if you need anything. Have a great stay. Evan. I unpacked, made myself some tea, and settled onto the couch with a book. The place had a comforting stillness, though I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I chalked it up to the unfamiliar setting and decided to call it a night. The next morning, I noticed something strange. In the bathroom, there were 2 toothbrushes in the holder, one blue, one red. I only had my travel toothbrush, so who did the red one belong to? I messaged Evan. Hey, just wanted to check. Did someone leave a toothbrush here? Or did the last guest forget it? He replied quickly. Oh, sorry about that. Must have been left by the cleaner. Feel free to toss it. I tried to shrug it off, but as the day went on, little things began to feel off. The bedroom closet smelled faintly of cologne. The bed looked like someone had sat on it while I was out. That evening, I found a pair of men's socks under the bed. The apartment had one locked door in the hallway. I'd assumed it was a storage closet, but now I wasn't so sure. The faintest sound came from behind it, like a whisper or maybe breathing. I stared at the door for a long time before convincing myself it was my imagination. Still, I pushed the couch in front of it before going to bed. That night, I woke to a sound in the kitchen. At first, I thought it was the wind rattling the old windows, but then I heard footsteps. Soft, deliberate. I held my breath, clutching my phone, and waited. The footsteps stopped just outside my bedroom door. By morning, I was ready to leave. I packed my things in record time, but as I reached for my bag, I noticed something on the kitchen counter, a leather-bound journal that hadn't been there before. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The pages were filled with frantic writing, dated over the past few weeks. I hear him at night. He's in the walls, watching. I've changed the locks 3 times, but he always finds a way back in. Another entry. The police didn't believe me. They said no one else lives here, but I've seen him. He stands by my bed, smiling. The last entry was dated 2 days ago. I'm leaving tonight. If you're reading this, get out. Don't stay here. He doesn't like sharing. Panicking, I texted Evan. Where are you? Something is seriously wrong here. I'm leaving. No response. Then as I grabbed my bag, I noticed a key hanging from a hook near the front door. It hadn't been there before. A tag dangled from it, with the words basement access written in neat handwriting. My rational side screamed at me to leave, but some sick curiosity pulled me toward the basement. If the journal was real, I needed to know what was going on. I found the basement door at the end of the hall outside the apartment. The air inside was damp and cold, the dim light from a single bulb barely illuminating the steep stairs. The basement was more like a dungeon, stone walls, low ceilings, and a musty smell. In the center of the room was a twin bed, neatly made, surrounded by stacks of Polaroid photos scattered across the floor. I picked one up and nearly dropped it. It was me, sleeping in the apartment's bed. The next photo was of me sitting on the couch the night before. There were dozens more, me brushing my teeth, unpacking, reading. Then I saw it. A photo of a man standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me as I slept. The locked door opens. I backed away, my heart pounding, but then I heard it. Footsteps on the stairs. "Evan!" I called, my voice shaking. No answer. The steps grew louder, heavier. I scrambled toward the door, slamming it shut and locking it just in time. But the sound didn't stop. The footsteps were inside the basement now, moving closer. I ran up the stairs and into the apartment, slamming the door behind me. As I fumbled with my keys to leave, I heard the lock on the hallway's door click. The door creaked open, and a man stepped out. He was tall, thin, and grinning, his eyes wide with a wild energy. "Room for two?" he asked, his voice low and mocking. I didn't stay to find out. I drove through the night, stopping only when I reached the next town. I reported the incident to the police, but when they arrived, the apartment was empty. No journal, no photos, no sign of the man. The listing for the Airbnb had been deleted, and Evan's profile no longer existed. I tried to move on, but last week, I got a notification from the app. A new message from a host named Evan. "Thanks for staying. Come back soon." Attached was a photo of me in the basement, holding the journal. And behind me, the man was smiling.